Are you worried about Democrats being too far left to beat MAGA and take back the White House? Good. You're paying attention. Three polls have come out over the last 2 weeks asking the question we'll all be obsessed with come November 4th. What will Democratic voters in the 2028 presidential primary look for? It can be hard to keep up with all the polls and political science research and election forecasting. So, to help make sense of it, we're breaking it down on the two scales that matter. How progressive are Democratic primary voters actually? And how do they prioritize winning a general election versus a candidate who shares their lefty views? Here's what you need to know. Democratic voters really have moved left, and they've done so pretty consistently for decades. That's lesson one. Liberals now outnumber moderates in the Democratic Party. Every year since 1995, Democrats have gotten about a point more liberal. So, a party that was 25% liberal when Bill Clinton was running for re-election became 40% liberal when Barack Obama was running for re-election, and then crossed 50% the first time Joe Biden tried to say Latinx out loud, or somewhere around there. According to Gallup, 55% of Democrats consider themselves liberal. Recent polling from the moderate think tank Third Way showed about 60% of likely voters in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary identify as either liberal, progressive, or socialist. The Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank, used a wider definition in a poll they just released, including anyone who voted against Trump in 2024, as well as all Democrats. And among this bigger group, half identified as liberal, progressive, or socialist. So, however you slice it, it looks like a majority. So, does that mean Democrats are assured of having a liberal nominee in 2028? No. That brings us to lesson two. When voting in a primary, many liberals prioritize the candidate best positioned to beat the Republican, not the candidate who shares their liberal policy views. So, sure, a majority of Democrats are now liberal. And moderates, well, we need to accept that fact, for now anyway. But a swing bloc who personally hold progressive views still prioritize candidates who will win the general election. By more than 2 to 1, Democrats prefer candidates who prioritize governing effectively, even if they are less focused on fighting Trump. That's not the case for Republicans, by the way. An NBC poll released last week showed that while more than 4 in 10 voters in Democratic primaries felt like it was more important to vote for a candidate with the best chance to win, a clear majority of Republican primary voters went for ideological purity over winning. So expect the number of Democrats prioritizing winning to continue to climb. Back in 2015, just 3 in 10 Democrats prioritized winning over the issues. Trump changed all that. By the time of the 2020 primary, it was more than 6 in 10. So what does winning mean? Brings us to lesson three. Few Democrats think winning requires moving to the left. Just 1 in 5 Democrats think the Democratic Party needs to move further to the left to energize its base. Nearly twice as many think the Democratic Party needs to move towards the center to win over more voters. So add that all up. Let's get back to the two scales that matter. How progressive are Democratic primary voters, really? And how much do they prioritize winning versus purity tests? These add up to 4 types of Democrats in the 2028 presidential primary. Moderate to conservative voters are up top, very liberal, socialist voters at the bottom. On the left, voters who focus on ideology. On the right, voters focused on winning. So the bottom half, liberal, progressive, socialist voters, they're a clear majority here, outnumbering moderate and conservative voters by 10 points, 55 to 45. Voters on the right side, who prioritize winning over policy, will look to be a similar share by the time the primary heats up heading into 2028, with about 55% prioritizing winning, 45% prioritizing issue purity. So in the top right, we have moderates for a majority. Those are voters who hold moderate or conservative positions, but prioritize winning over ideological purity. They constitute about 30% of primary voters. Their mod or die counterparts, moderate and conservative voters who prioritize ideology over winning, are the smallest group, about 15% of primary voters. Combined, these moderates will fall short of a majority. The purity left is about 30% of voters. You can see them on the bottom left, and you can see them on blue sky. They include both voters who prioritize left-wing views over winning and voters who believe that winning requires moving to the left. That leaves us with the strategic left swing vote. There's a tug of war between the heart and the head here. These voters are personally liberal, but prioritize winning over policy views, and understand that winning doesn't mean moving to the left. The strategic left is the swing bloc. Remember them from the 2020 primary? These are the voters who caused Elizabeth Warren to surge to 30% in October 2019, but then were scared off the next month when polling from the New York Times showed she'd lose to Trump. They fled, and within weeks, her average was right back down to 14%. This is why there's such a contentious battle going on right now within the Democratic Party to define electability, because whoever wins the strategic left wins the nomination. So, still worried about Democrats being too far left to beat MAGA and take back the White House? Good. You're paying attention. And you may also be the swing vote in the 2028 primary.